Okay, so welcome to the September 10th edition of the Alta Mesa Center for the Arts reading series. Today we host Karen Llagas and Leticia del Toro, who, among other things, are tremendous poets, translators, teachers, and also fellow members of the Hedgebrook Sisterhood. Also, I see Vanessa Wah in the room as well. So there's a good contingent of us here. And we'll talk a little bit in the course of the program about Hedgebrook and about how that organization is championing women's voices from around the world. Alta Mesa Center for the Arts is an interfaith arts and spirituality hub housed within and sponsored by Orinda Community Church. We believe that art is a spiritual act and a human right. We wish to provide a place where people from diverse traditions, artistic practices, and economic realities come together in community. We know that art can bridge the divisions, substantive and arbitrary, that divide us. We come together not only to practice and teach the arts, but to celebrate and learn from our differences and to foster lively and respectful interdisciplinary dialogues. We seek unity in diversity. So wherever you are, whoever you are on your artistic or your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. You're also welcome here, the many of you who have contacted me to say, please send a link. I can't make it at 4. So whatever time you find us, you too are welcome here. Leticia del Toro is a Mexican-American poet and fiction writer from Crockett, California. Her travels to Mexico, Spain, and France also inform her work. All we are told not to touch is her debut poetry release from Finishing Line Press. Her writings have appeared in Ziziva, About Place Journal, and many more. Core Press published her novella Cafe Colima, which is exquisite, and if you can find a copy, you're gonna have a treat. Additional honors include residencies to Hedgebrook, Bread Loaf, and Story Knife. Leticia has also thrived in the writing communities of Vona and Macondo. She is a graduate of UC Berkeley and UC Davis. She has recently been awarded the Jack Hazard Fellowship from New Literary Project for high school teachers who are creative writers. Leticia is currently working on a novel called Return to Azucena. How do you say that? Azucena?
Azucena, there you go.
Ah, beautiful. Karen Llagas' new chapbook, All of Us Are Cleaved, is now out from Nomadic Press. Her first collection of poetry, Archipelago Dust, was published in Meritage Press in 2010. A recipient of the 2020 Rhino Founders Prize, a Senior Memorial Poetry Prize, an Elizabeth George Award, and a Hedgebrook residency. Her poems, translations, prose, and reviews have appeared in various journals and anthologies, some of which you can read here. There's a link. You can click on it on your program. She was born and raised in the Philippines. She has an MFA in writing from Warren Wilson College and a BA from Ateneo de Manila. Pardon me. Karen lectures at UC Berkeley and works as a freelance translator and a cultural consultant. She divides her time between San Francisco and Los Angeles with her husband and her 2 dogs. Now, different as both of these books are, we're celebrating 2 books here today of poetry. Different as they are in style, from the prose rhythms of Leticia del Toro's All We Are Told Not to Touch, to the spacious and contemplative cadences of Karen Llagas's All of Us Are Cleaved. Both authors stand witness to 2 countries and 2 languages and reveal each in her own way how the contradictions that seem to undermine, perhaps unravel who we are and what we believe at any given moment might in fact define us, and more to the point, define our relationship to home and to those we have lost and to the people we are becoming. Both of these books examine how wonder and grief carry on together day by day. It's a tremendous pleasure to have both of these women on our show, and it's a pleasure too to kind of start in a little bit different way. In the past, we've gone back and forth. One reader reads and then the other, but there's so much interplay and conversation between these 2 collections that I'm hoping we can go back and forth with the courage of these two readers who have agreed tentatively before to do this. And Karen, if you wouldn't mind starting with a poem, we're going to try a question, an answer and response mode of a reading and see what happens. You are welcome to leave comments in the chat. We will kind of circle back to those comments once the reading comes to an end. But feel free to put in there whatever you want. I will also put links of where to buy these exquisite works. And from then on, I will hush and maybe step in with a question now and again. But Karen, start us out.
Mary, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for the work you do for the community and for AMCA. And thank you, Leticia, for sharing space today. And I'm so glad we just decided to do this more kind of organic way of reading. And it's I'm a bit nervous, but I think it also makes the reading and the conversation alive. So from your introduction, Mary, I thought I'll start with the second poem in the book, which is a bit more intimate and about the domestic space. And it's called Gratitude Journal. I flinch as I reach for it. This practice we do each night in bed. Our pillow talk these days, when sending ourselves off to sleep, needs less effort than late night sex. Does this flinch expose how little regard I have for joy? Is this why I clasp our $1 journal like an amulet? One time I wrote oysters at the balcony, all shucked by you. Another day, sleeping in. You always thank a task at work, some beautiful fish or other. Tonight is a small entry, the word end, how I carry a small syllable to bridge in me the scared and the sacred, to help me sing well enough the everyday swirls and chaos. Can I do one small thing to further us along? My early ancestors survived turning towards what they destroyed. They killed so much, now I don't have to. At least not as much, especially not myself, not the tenderest part. Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, wow. Response to that. I'm going to read an older poem that kind of sets the tone for country, maybe, and also womanhood. And Mary, you mentioned some of these trace a trajectory of who we are becoming. And so I felt like there was a lot of who I was becoming in this poem. And it's a bit long, so I will try to read the bulk of it. It's called Burning Cane. Sweet acrid burning, I wake from hot sleep, swing my legs out of a borrowed bed. My feet recoil on the gritty concrete, toes curled in fear of roaches, chunky as mice. A sunny patio still beckons through luxury of windows with screens. I sit outside back to the bougainvillea wall, eyes to the sky, then hide from the strangest rain, then bow to nature, clasp my ankles, for the black wispy ashes are floating, demonic snowflakes wafting freely in a seesaw fall at my feet. A visit in Tuspan requires candles at the temple, glances exchanged with women huddled at doorsteps who watch my walk to the cemetery. Carnations and lilies are laid for an abuela I never knew. She died at 34, kicked by a horse, they say, and then her heart exploded with too much love for a man too far north. A sign in the plaza alerts volcano activity. Today, risk of eruption is low. Next door, the neighbors are chatting. ¿Cómo amaneció de ceniza? Han de estar quemando caña. So this is cane ash in the tropical plains. The volcano, despite its light plume, like a black-clad mistress of the evening, spews a thin, deliberate line of smoke. She is mocking but will not blow. The blood of Cain is burning here. I am struck by each lace-like ash, parachute imps as individual and torrid as a passion intoned. The day I married in the forest, it rained. Rain's wet tongue turned to velvet whispers. Pink light shone off the cliffs. The ground opalescent was my jewel. We fled the company of pride. Friends said mariage pluvieux, mariage heureux, but they said nothing about the snow. The church will fill today in Tuxpan with mariachis, compadres, little tokens, lassos, and coins. What do they say of a marriage amid ashes? Are there benedictions for my sojourn alone? I catch the ashes in their seesaw fall. They caress my palm like lucky wishes. Maybe each one is a desire, a dream in full flight and expired before I catch it, touch it. Who knows what dreams some women may have, how they die without telling. Did Abuela too watch the ashes fall? Here al pie del volcán, was she patiently waiting, or did she sweep ashes away on the hour in front of her clean and godly door? Leave it there.
I love that sense of place and family in that poem, Leticia. Thank you. I'm going to read a newer poem in response to it that also has ashes a lot in the poem. And speaking of where we are in our moment in this planet, I think, especially in California. And this is part of the new manuscript that I'm working on. It's called Praise the Fire, and with thanks to Joy Harjo. Praise the fire, the canyon it cleared, the dire, the dry, the coast below, the godwits and the snowy egrets, the silver glitter that dusted the rose bushes a few seconds before our eyes discerned it as ash. I paused to praise all the ways I could not have been here today. There's the mysterious pill one New Year's Eve years ago, getting into a stranger's car after being lost on a trail in Mount Ham, and one more time in rural France. There was a spinning truck on the drive back from Black Rock, the lies I told the police to keep an ex-lover's brother from being deported. Oh, the effigy, how big the flames, how seductive. Praise choosing the same regrets over, burning the same bridges, the town towards you, the cinders. Thank you.
Beautiful. That felt very imagistic and sensual to me, and also dangerous. There's a little danger in there. So I'm going to read a poem I don't read very often. It's actually probably the newest one in the collection, and it's called Shine. We say goodbye in the quiet harbor, but it feels more like, wait, hold me, which coast will we walk again? You take my hand and draw murals inside my palm. Altamira, San Carlos, Lascaux, Lindosa, all the beauty I can feel now. I watch you eat a clementine, you bite it like an apple. I bite a scoop of ice cream this way because I cannot wait. We are flashes of cinnamon, copper aurora, burnished rumorosa, creme brulee, candied ginger, flor de Jamaica, colors of cantera stone, boysenberry rose, miel de acacia, molten gold I am poured of, to hold a jewel of your choice. I will wear you many ways. How to smile at the edge of the world. Camino sin equilibrio al compás que solo tú puedes seguir. I put my ear to your chest as if to a seashell, press my cheek to a cliff, hang on your heartbeat, feel life rush in, the music of so many oceans. Thanks.
Thank you. I I'm just marveling at how some poems we don't read so much, maybe because they speak so much truth and are so vulnerable. And I certainly felt that in that poem. And I'm glad it's, you're giving it more space in the world. That I think, let's see. I don't know. Then I'm going to read a poem too that I feel is not quite complete, but it's also part of the new manuscript. And then I'll go back to the book. Goodness. Okay. Because loss has wings, the child sees the cobra's molten skin and begins to fly. The mango tree, snapped in half, begins to fly. The child watches tulips on yellow and red powdered milk cartons, begins to keep the light low, burns the last candles. Hand him a single strawberry with its bangs of green. Let him fly, lose all colors. Then the corn, the bowl of feathers. Let her study the way trees lose leaves deliberately. Stories purling and stitching themselves, face turning into a road.
I feel like part of why we're called here today or invited today by Mary is to kind of hone in on writing as spiritual practice as well. And so I think I'd like to read a poem called Bougainvilleas, and I would be remiss if I didn't read it today. It kind of got me started on this poetry addiction, and it was also a survival poem for me. I wrote it in probably the 8 months after I lost my brother, who was very close to me in age. And this was, in the late 90s. So it's been a while, but it took me quite a long time to read it. And now I'm in the habit of sharing it. And it's also the season in which I experienced the loss. It was in October. So every fall, I really feel this poem very strongly. And I was also out gardening today, trimming bougainvilleas. So I'm going to read this one. Bougainvillea. I cut sprays of bougainvillea with a steak knife on my lunch break. Deep azalea and flamenco orange. The vines entangle the iron railing, stretching in garlands that shade the square of the warehouse porch. Bougainvillea are free here. Work has imposed a stoicism fed by coffee, computer screens, anonymous marketing schmooze, and I hide as music vendor, publicity coordinator extraordinaire, the import, export, foreign port, CD cover queen, email, teleport, dream, dream on, move on, pretend no one died. Hold on to your life where sorries are swift. People whisper and wonder why you're back so soon. On the stairway around one, sun is high, the best time for bougainvillea and quiet. So strong these branches are thick, these thorns amaze me. I had no idea, all this time I bought roses. Bougainvillea who pose and menace, I am happy now as they will stay chaste. Mini Kozo paper lanterns in fuchsia to wave and hang over your name. No one will dare bend down to kiss your grave. This is part 2. It is cruel to be buried in a plot facing the children's section. The pinwheels and mini balloons spin and bob the way. Is this a torment? Do you see it like I do? My pain should be less to see a young couple at the baby graves. Come to see a boy named Elias. The oval photo reveals his tender brown face, proud of Oakland Raiders blacks and grays. Life will trick and cheat you like a cheap Vegas chapel. One day you own a Victorian home. You shop for satin nickel fixtures and custom kitchen tiles. You worry about the trees who invade your pristine bay view. You have a project to do in the attic. You stockpile sheetrock in the yard. It needed to be hung before it rained. You should have put it away. Who would have thought such a hot October day would be your last? Orange lavender sunset, so still. I watched you weld. Ornamental curlicues on some iron gates you designed. That ash red metal could have been a brand on your muscles. Taut canvas for the Gothic heart banner tattoo. How'd it take them 2 days to identify you when your name was inked on your shoulder?
That's so heartbreaking. Thank you, Leticia. I think I will read a little bit from the book, and I'm going to read. Okay, why not? I'll read a poem about my mother. And I laugh because I used to write a whole lot about her. We're in better terms. I'm kidding. I think you know, I'm one of those writers that write a lot about their mother or their father, and then write on about something else, and then go back to family. Family is such a huge pull in the Filipino community, but also in many cultures. But this is a pandemic poem, but it's also all kinds of poem. Our hands will not touch. Our hands will not touch in the dough bowl. So when my mother phoned, I said, knead longer and not harder, then wait. This advice confounds her, how to let time do what hands cannot. I should have said, this is the logic of yeast, the invisible work of growth. I should have said, fire needs air. Who hasn't craved for the pandesal of her young motherhood, of nights-long hospital shifts in the big city, a fullness I imagined she was having without me, pork pineapple stews to be soaked by the rolls more sweet than salt, dusted with days-old crumbs. She always arranged them on the plate like a bed of brown pebbles, offering comfort. Because even then I could count how many times my mother's hands and mine had touched. I listened to her new passion for cooking with a wariness children reserve for adults. After her call, I looked up Kairos again because of a recent movie I saw with a friend. Here is the asymmetry I still cannot resolve. How I met my friend for tea years before my mother's call, how we laughed about my dating life, that once when the sheets got busy, I had to stop because of the crucifix necklace dancing above me, how it felt like I was having a threesome with Jesus. But why this memory with this more recent story, like some Newman passing, some golden place at the intersection of guilt and abandonment?
Lovely, really lovely. Such a rich, rich poem. And I love it when people write about food. I'm starting to feel our parallels and our overlaps in the poetry. So Mary, you were onto something. I'm going to read a poem about my father, because yes, I too write about grandparents, parents. It's such a wealth of inspiration when you have these relationships. So this is a poem called Playa Cuastecomate, and it's for my father, Ramon. Because there was always your next drink. You did not know my children in your life. They are here to meet you in the waves. Here in the blue half-moon cove, where families savor ceviche, cocadas and bocazos de mar. We're here to laugh, roar, and run. You and I laughed rarely. To tear into the waves is joy. I see you in your fisherman's gear, a travel tube of poles Americano style, floral print shirt and huaraches. You punch your thighs to show me how strong legs must be kept. Fuerte así. I see you, selling baskets of bread as a boy, slashing cocos and scamming your next meal. And I prayed under my breath. Sorry, you often told me, don't turn your back to the sea. And I prayed under my breath, don't leave us. I watch my son and daughter now enter the waves, no fear. Me, all edges and wiry fretting. I wish them some injury just to know caution. They dive in, venture further into jeweled surrender that is ancestral. Run back to me, touch base at my hip. My gnarled nerves keep me from biting the garlic huachinango, from guzzling the icy beer. Out of my chair, a rogue wave washes over us. A rolling wall, I am slammed, yet long in my reaching for air, for image. I scan the surface, spot my boy. Where's my girl? She somersaults out, bobs like a seal, gold-flecked face of salt and tears. How far I let them go to know you, in a tender hold of tangled limbs. You were once a child like this, who hungered and huddled after the tide pulled you in.
What a beautiful poem. Thank you. I think I'm gonna do a little shift from family to other topics that I also write about, which is, well, the Philippines. And I have also what I consider some political poems, but I noticed that many of these poems I still mediate through the lyric self, and the eye that sees and witness to these things. Okay, and this one has a Tagalog phrase in it, and it's tao po, which is basically a greeting like good morning, or somebody's here, hello, as we would say. Pre-departure. You are going to a country where you can have a human shape without being such. It's a simple enough premise. Learn the phrase, a human is here. It means more than your name. You ask, is there anything we can be but human? This country is home to forest guardians, duendes, shapeshifters. Tao po. Repeat it, accent on the last syllable. What you say, who you say it to, opens doors. You will announce you're a person outside someone's gate. What the visited will hear before they let you in. Our country is a beauty mark on the Pacific's cheek. Everyone you'll meet would have said it. The dirt poor, the dirt wealthy. The paramilitary says it, then waits for the targeted to open their door. Claim your tongue, no matter how flawed, you must shapeshift again, again and again.
It's wonderful. I also have political poems, and they're both political and family poems centered on particular figures. And sometimes I feel like I'm very locked into my life, teacher, mother, I have less time to express my political voice. And I think poetry is where I do that. Poetry is sort of the place or the space where I engage with things that are happening in the world, and I may not always have an audience, but again, those lyrics that lines that come back to me are my voice sort of clamoring and reacting to what's happening. So I will read this next poem, Alive at Lampedusa. On radio, breaking news of drowning at Lampedusa. It is not a name I know, but sound bites of Italian coast, Roman mayor, deadly seas, bring to mind so many refugee ships. I'm thinking of Elian, I'm thinking of Cuba, of Ceuta and death by water, or death by desert, which is more inhumane. Why does this report break my heart today? Is it the exotic port name or the thought of Eritrean souls downed in the Mediterranean? I once saw Euro tourists ferried with their cars to islands of sumptuous beauty. Corsica, Sardinia, Sicily, playgrounds for Europeos, now haunted by Yamaya's children. I am the daughter of a man who at age 14 walked the desert for days, sunsick and weakened. He took blows to the head, then woke up in jail, to the broomstick beating of an elderly man. When my father died at 77, now alone in his own kind of frailty, his house was empty except for a Bible, a typewriter, and notes of his own crossing at Yuma. I have been one to covet summer sands among the crowded Côte d'Azur. What is that luxury worth? Will we not see their faces in the waves? Where does nationality go when the body disappears? They are fellow citizens of my paisas in the desert, the unnamed but numbered. How is it that we house the dead in modern stateside morgues, but we cannot shelter the living, we cannot offer a hand? When a child suckling her mother's milk empties the right breast, does she not move on to the left? Are we not free to watch, to search our Madre Tierra, as free to search and settle in her fertile curves? Refugees who survived the fires on the waters did not stay put in their shelters, in spite of welcome kits of deodorant and toothpaste. Officials were astounded by those who fled. To run free is to know you're hunted. But what is worse, death by drowning on a fiery ship, or death by heat and fortified funneling through hell of bracken fields and barren waste that ends in Pima County? To be alive at Lampedusa or Ceuta or Arizona could only hold a lamplight to your heart. You know the gift of a new day, a drink of water, of refuge from the sun. May we imagine what we can give in our lives mired in property deeds and credit lines. We will never know the force of hunger or the urge to run, or the absolute gold that is every day that awaits you.
I'm gonna end with this poem, and I think we'll have a conversation later on where maybe we can pick up some of these threads and themes. But this is also from the book, and I consider it a political poem, but I think it's other poems besides. And as an immigrant who used to not have a US passport, the customs and the immigration is something I dealt with a lot, coming and going from the Philippines. So this poem is somehow grounded in one of those documents, which is I don't know what they call it, the immigration form. Are you bringing fruits, plants, seeds, animals, disease agents, snails, soil? O border agent, buffed and blushing, monsters are portable too. The one Hollywood imported, the one wild and winged and cleaved at the waist. She would travel her tendril tongue across your stonewall abs to reach the soft liver, her hunger a murder. What is the value of all the articles that will remain in the United States? I must have heard you say particles, which is only partly what we are, since we are also waves reporting back to the moon. Forgive me, I must have been daydreaming of pounded rice sweetened with crab fat. I'm looking at you and thinking fondly of red, necessary agent to other colors. It's 5:40 a.m. We're both hungry, and my advice is bread. Do you know a rosebud that refuses to bloom is called a bullet? How many flowers now spangle our streets, dear agent, because our country is a clenched fist? Step in front of the camera, try not to smile. Oh, but I have more to declare. Thank you.
It's beautiful and powerful. I feel like both of our readings today have taken us far away, just globally, and yet to very intimate spaces as well. So I'm going to read something that feels more local in California and San Francisco to me, and bring it a little closer to home. This is called Just Outside the Gate. And I wrote it during the pandemic because I was wanting to take dance classes, and I felt I had these dance goals that I'd never completed in my life. And I was like, oh, if the world's ending, I better know how to dance properly. Like my Latina education wasn't complete. So this is inspired from taking dance classes in a patio outside the mission. Just outside the gates, you can breathe a cumbia that someone else is bumping. It's a summons for your sway, your loose, ambling saunter. Que callejera esta, Mom hisses, 'cause you're a girl who hangs outside. ¿Qué andas haciendo en la calle? Dejándote mirar? My gaze at strangers when they gaze back is much too forward. Es que también me gusta mirar. But I'm not just talking about looking at men. I love kids running wild on the sidewalk, in and out of each other's houses, improvising canchas on a not so busy street, singing to Rihanna on a warehouse pallet, ringing a swing to a regal tree. I love the viejitos talking about who they seen at La Pulga, or si su viejita lo agarró pelándole ojo a la del security gate en la refinería. I love the 7-year-olds' choreo magic, meneándose y dando taconazo to cumbia tribalera, paletas in hand and flip-flops not abiding. Someone's artful edible salsa rules the block. I mean, roasted, soul-cleansing chile guajillo and windowsill cilantro. Pa las tostaditas, comadrita, no seas mala, ¿por qué no invitas? So much to take in beyond the gate. No me importa que mami me dé una jalada. I've seen Yadira, Ishel, and Xiomara, these little girls trading beanie boos and homemade bracelets, and their masterpieces of neon chalk mark the way to the second grade pachanga. Long live the mini callejeras. Glad you learned to play outside. Thanks.
You can go ahead and unmute, and just thank you to both of you that was beautiful. And thank you for doing it at very short notice, literally 10 minutes before the event. I said, well, let's try this. And it took tremendous courage and insight too. The way that you were listening to one another and responding it was a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Yep.
I have one question, but then we can open it up. You feel free to unmute to ask a question or to put one into the chat. If you have questions for each other, you're welcome to do that as well. My question again is about the making of a poem, and it's actually about how the poem makes you. And I know with fiction writing, you have to kind of write yourself into the person capable of telling the story. And so you're inevitably changed by the end of that process, which is equal parts will. It's not equal parts will. It's will and then a whole lot of surrender to a process over which, I don't have much control. But how did you find that? Karen, you were talking the other day about this book in particular, writing yourself back into the practice of writing. Maybe you could start and talk about that, about why the writing is essential to becoming who you are.
Yeah, and I think Leticia also kind of points to this, how we are all these roles we carry, you know, mother and daughter, and especially as, I think, as women of color, as caretakers in our communities, as activists, we just we're just expected to do so much in the world, right? And part of me is always like, I actually can spend a good part of my life just doing that. You know, and there's just another poet that says, you know, I realized finally, and I think it's Kelly Agadon, who said, what you love gets displaced, but also the other things you love. So at the end of the day, it becomes, there are obviously portions of myself that do not get fully expressed, no matter how successful I am at all the other roles of motherhood, or being a friend or daughter or teacher, or, you know, or organizer, and these things. And I think that's what poetry making and art making does to us, at least for me, is to go, this is a place where there are many parts of you that you still don't know might have a chance to be explored, to be talked to be carried along to the other parts of yourself. And I think there's something about that that's very powerful, you know, this combination of being in the uncertain and the unknown, and letting that speak to the rest of us women who are doing all kinds of things for our family and communities, but also always in this doing mode, you know. And so much of poetry is listening, and so much of it is standing into, it's funny because you're trying to put it into language, but so much of it starts in not having the language, at least for me, you know, and having 3 phrases, 3 words, 2 images that are beautiful to you, but you don't want to explain why they're beautiful, but you know that there's something there. So anyway, I'm rambling, so I'll let Leticia like speak to that as well, but I'll start there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm nodding a lot because I'm hearing what sounds like a similar process for me, of just having a few lines of recurring lines of like beauty or something echoing in my brain that I have to sit with and unravel. So that's sort of how poetry works for me. And sorry, but my cat is over here. She's just woken up and she's like crunching in her bowl. So if you hear her, sorry. But Mary also knows that I'm a fiction writer, and I've spent a lot of time writing short stories. And I guess I'm called to poetry in a different way, because it gives me a sense of satisfaction if I can sit down and get my feelings out, or get my rage out, or get my sadness out, or explore an image and explore an old dream, and do that in a shorter, more compressed frame of time. And so I think that's why I've been able to produce poetry over the years, and it's been a very raw sort of place for me to write. Whereas where I'm writing short stories, I feel like I have to be drawn into this world, and it takes a whole lot more time for me to get into that world, and to separate from my family life, and to get into this world building that I have to do. And poetry feels just so much more raw and immediate. And honestly, if I didn't have my poems, I somehow think that, yeah, I wouldn't be the same person that I am now. And like my poems have helped me define myself in different ways, and hold on to my individuality and sort of personhood, because a lot of that does get eroded when you're a giver, you're in a giving profession, you're a teacher, you're in service somehow in your community, or you're a mom, you're giving all the time. And poems for me are places where I could be a little more possessive and selfish about my space and my dreams, but still also talk about things that, perhaps people aren't calling me to talk about immigration, but damn it, I have an opinion and I have a reaction, and I need to talk about what I've seen and what I've heard and how that touches me, so yeah, definitely it does kind of define me in many ways.
Both of you talk about giving and all of these many roles in which you're required to offer and offer and offer. And it sounds like much of poetry and fiction is that you have to be present and quiet enough to receive something. And once you have received whatever it is, it has to be incubated in some way. St. Augustine, early in his Confessions, has one line I have on my wall, and that is, "Have mercy that I might find words." And it sounds like a similar plea for the radical act of retreat, so that you might find the space that where the words might come to you. What role has retreating, either at Hedgebrook, Leticia, you've been to Story Knife as well. What role has the retreat played in your artistic life? And do you think it's important, especially for women, to have those opportunities that Hedgebrook, for example, provides?
Oh, absolutely. It's hugely vital. If it hadn't been for Hedgebrook and some of the other retreats I've been on, I feel like I'm always sort of on the edge. Do I keep going? Do I pull back? Do I, pack up this poetry gig or this writing gig? And every retreat I have, I must say, has pushed me further along. And, when you have that quiet and that freedom and that sustenance, because when you go away to these retreats, I'm thinking of Hedgebrook in particular, and Story Knife is actually modeled very closely after Hedgebrook. You have people feeding you and caring for you and making sure your cabin is beautiful and functional. And as like the mom and the leader of a household, I usually don't have people caring for me in that way, right? I'm caring for everyone else. So to have that sustenance and support it's truly like moving, and it kind of obligates you to keep going forward. I'm always thinking about those experiences, and I think, these people have invested in me, right? And have invested in me being here and other women writers being here. And so I owe it to them to keep trying, and so that is how it's kept me afloat in so many ways.
A different kind of obligation. Yeah.
But a beautiful one, a really strong like calling to keep going and to find that fire. Yeah.
Karen, do you have a response? And then Elizabeth has a question.
Yeah, just a quick one. Like communities like this also give me a sense that it's not just about my poem. Do you know what I mean? It's about Leticia's poem, and it's about your poem, Mary. It's about the poem of my peers in my community. Like we always think we're working as if we are the sole person pushing up against these difficulties and these resistances. And every time I attended somebody's, Hedgebrook that curated this space, or you, Mary, and I do the same in other settings, it puts me back in the conversation, so that wherever I am in my writing process, whether that be in this abundance of new work or the work of revision, or like at this point now where I just finished this book and I'm going, okay, I'm working slowly, as if you're tending to little seedlings for the next book. If I'm not part of these communities, and I just wouldn't have enough, to keep going. And so it's so circular, all these ways of giving, right? Like Hedgebrook provided for me, but it allows me to also provide for not just for my work, but for the work of other writers, as what you're doing now, Mary, so I think it's a beautiful very organic ecosystem that we're all kind of cultivating for each other. Yeah.
An impulsive reciprocity, I think, from
Yeah.
what I've experienced in Hedgebrook, that anyone who's been feels not even compelled, they just do give back in some way.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, you had a question.
Well, I did have a question, and Karen, you transitioned into it very well for me, so thank you so much. So it really is about community. So I think so often, I'm a writer as well, and it's a very insular practice. We're in our minds a lot, we're in rooms with closed doors a lot. And so it's always wonderful when we can have some community, and Hedgebrook sounds amazing. However, we don't live there. So I'm just curious as to each of you, how do you incorporate writing community throughout your life when you're not at a place like Hedgebrook? How can writers do Hedgebrook light, maybe a little bit each day? If you would share, some things that you do, or some things that you think, the community can do, I would love to hear it.
I can start, because I get super excited about this topic. I'm part of like Filipino American Association for Writers and Artists, and we do public facing events like Filipino International Book Festival and things like that, and tons of readings and organization. And I have to say, I'm not so good at those things. I'm the kind of personality that I love organization, but whenever it's public facing, it gives me a little bit of a pause, right? Because it's not just about me and my fellow writers, it's about bringing people over. So I do help there, but I go, what do I enjoy? I love being in workshops. I love reading books together. So for example, just on my own practice, I organize my own, we have a poetry book reading club, that we do every month just over Zoom. So that's one way. And we're all poets reading books that we love. And of course, being part of workshops and seminars that are organized. One is with a group of people that I met through Community of Writers. And obviously it's kind of all along the spectrum. Mary, of course, is more of a personal friend and a sister from Hedgebrook. So all these different levels of connections, right? But I think my main prescription there is to do something that ultimately also energizes you. Because I think as organizers and artist organizers, we give and give and give. But for me, I've done it long enough to go, okay, there are things that I do that actually I'm doing for the labor of it and for the love of it. But I know at the end, if I do it, it's to the point of depletion, it's not going to be sustainable, right? And then there are other practices I do with my community that I actually do love. If I show up in our book club and I'm the only person there, the worst that happened is that I read a book that I loved and I showed up, and nobody's there, and then we go again next month. So that's kind of my community practice. Yeah, it's a gift that I give back to myself by giving to others.
Yeah, no, I think community is absolutely key. So I think over the years, as you take more workshops, or you go to different conferences, or you just maybe meet people in a class that you have an affinity with, and share work on an informal level, eventually you can get to the point where you exchange work, but also I have a very solid group of women writer friends that I go away with, and they were all here in the Bay Area, but we didn't know each other, and we showed up in the same anthology one season. It was the Huizache Latino literature journal that's now being published out of UC Davis, but we didn't know each other. And so we kind of, found out who was on the publications list, and we reached out to each other, and we said, we're going to build a Bay Area reading to showcase this issue. And so we networked and did all this stuff, and tons of people showed up, and we made money from it. And then with that money, we said, hey, let's go on a retreat. So we made our own retreat, And we've kind of been doing it seasonally ever since. Actually, this year we don't have one calendared, so it reminds me we have to do it. But we kind of informally called ourselves the Chingona Collective. And I find going away does wonders for my work and focus. And to me, that's Hedgebrook Light, is just making space in my life that is unfortunately not in my own home. Like, I have to go to a little cabin somewhere, or cat sit for a friend, or anything that I need to do to get out of my domestic space, because there are so many things calling me here that tell me you don't have time to write. So having sisterhood and companionship and space somewhere else helps me to continue the Hedgebrook spirit. Yeah.
There's a
Thank you both.
local poet, Sarah Farouki, who's Islamic mystic poet, and she talks about the collective consciousness that we have access to even when alone and separate. And part of it is forged by the fact that those poems and are going to be speaking to each other in my mind, in my imagination, for weeks now, but probably even beyond the time when I'm consciously remembering them. But I do think there's something to be said for the spiritual foundation of the collective consciousness, that if you just find that place to listen, if you can get away from your domestic duties long enough to hear something beyond the dishwasher, there's some spiritual element too, I think, that might connect us. Anita says COVID has kidnapped my voice. Sorry, Anita. But she's wondering if you use your dreams as sources for poems.
Yes, I would say yes. And also waking experiences, but I have a lot of, how do I say this? I feel like I still connect, especially with people that have passed. My father, my brother, my grandmother. They, have like these parallel moments with me in dream time. And I try and mine those feelings and really hold on to those feelings and work with poems later that have to do with my dreams. Maybe not like exact scenarios, this is what I dreamed last night, but work with those feelings of closeness to the person, or feelings of missing the person. Definitely.
I think to the extent that dreams interrupt the logic of the waking life and the conscious, then I use them. But I try to be careful not then to interpret my dreams, because I think that's the magic of them, is just giving us this infinite wellspring of images, of conversations with people who've passed, to our future selves, our past selves, to kind of, you go into the realm of the visions, or in the visionary, so, and that apocalyptic in my on my case. Usually I dream apocalyptic dreams, and they manage to find themselves in the poems. So yeah.
That's a great question.
Thank you. Yeah.
We are out of time for this week, this month. I really enjoyed that. Thank you to both of you. Thank you to the questions from the audience as well, and for your attention. We have a couple of events coming up. I'm going to share my screen briefly before we come back to say official goodbye. And that is, next event at Alta Mesa Center is a dialogue between the visual and the poetic, with 4 poets: Heidi Van Horn, Jennifer Ching, Maud Teswani, and Sarah Rosenthal. Really remarkable artists, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. We haven't done something like that before where we're topical, but I think we're just getting a little experimental here. So there's also coming up is fictionalizing the family archives. This is out of Maker, Mentor, Muse, which is kind of the teaching arm of Alta Mesa Center, a generative multi-genre writing salon by Noelani Peters. And it's benefiting the Hawaii Community Foundation at Maui Strong Fund. So if you're interested in that, take a look at that. There's a registration. I'm also teaching a class called Healing Your Relationship to Your Work, or the Work. And I'm teaching this class because I needed it and still need it. And it is looking at the spiritual underpinnings of the writing process. We are going to look at crafts. We are going to look at the workshopping form, but we're also going to address how to approach the work in a way that's sustainable, even when the time is not available always. How to use, how to see doubt as something that's has use, of utility of doubt, rather than succumbing to it. So that's what we're going to do. That's with Left Margin Lit. There's a sign up for that as well. Beyond that, we have a great spring coming up in the next season. And I just am grateful for everyone who's here, but also all the people who are waiting for this video when I get it on YouTube too. So you can unmute yourselves if you like, clap, put your emojis down as you wish for your reactions. But again, I'm grateful, and I really enjoyed that hour. It went very fast.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the invitation, and such a pleasure meeting you, Karen. I have to get your book. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Leticia. And I'll be in touch on email. Can
Great.
exchange books there. Bye. Thank you.